That's
Yes.
the true beauty of being an English major.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we decided that we were going to start with the question, what's on your mind? So you go first.
Well, so I am reading Stamped from the Beginning. And I think the really positive part of this book is that it is making me rethink the entire way American literature is taught. Because I am uncovering all sorts of interesting slave owners throughout American literature. And when I teach American literature again, it's going to be very different.
That's a good thing to have on your mind, though, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's just kind of,
Well,
oh,
and
the same.
we celebrate so many white men for various things about talking about liberty and stuff like that. And then it's like they went home to their slaves.
Yeah,
And it's just
they
like,
went home
how
and
can we talk about that? So I'm definitely going to teach. I have to forefront that these people were slave owners when they're talking about freedom, because I think it's ridiculous not to. So
well, it's also
that's what
like
I've been
what
thinking
their
about.
definition of liberty is, isn't it?
Yes, it's very particularly white men.
Yeah.
And like, it's not even white Christian men. For a little while, being a Christian meant that you could sue for your freedom. And so for a
Oh,
long time, I know, they didn't want slaves to convert, because slaves could then be like, I'm a Christian, I should be free. And so it took a long time for like them to develop the intellectual infrastructure to be able to continue to enslave Christian people. So it's fascinating.
intellectual infrastructure.
Oh god, it took some hoops. They had to
Yeah,
leap. It
that's a
was
jump.
yeah. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Okay.
What are you thinking about?
I'm thinking about health. I'm thinking about
Mhm.
like what does it mean to be healthy, and how do you sort of attach that to body positivity, and how do you attach that to, being positive about who and what you are, but still maintaining health. There's a lot of, I'm not going to say fake, but unhealthy things that are touted out as health.
Oh yeah,
Like,
like all those like detox things and stuff like that.
yeah, and like, oh, you have to do these exercises in these ways because it's
Mhm.
scientifically proven to give you 0.0001% better of a
Mhm.
calorie burning exercise. And like, I think it's interesting that we do that, and that we have that concept of the body as something to punish
Mhm.
rather than the
Yeah.
body as something to want.
Or even just take care of. Like, it doesn't have to be positive, it can be neutral. But no,
Yeah.
we have to punish it. Like, we have
It's
to
like, no,
train
it's
it. And
bad.
Mhm.
Yeah. Or like, no brownies. Brownies are
Mhm.
bad. It's like, brownies are really good. Just don't have 20 brownies every
Right.
day. Like,
Yeah.
but that's not sexy. That doesn't sell books.
No,
So
of course not. Yeah.
yeah.
It's
And that
common
was actually
sense.
a beautiful segue into what we're talking about today. Which is how and why and what do we hand sell as books? And for those of you who might not know, hand selling is when you have a book in your hand and you look at a customer and you say, I think you'll like this book, and this is why. And it is an absolute art. And it's
Mhm.
an art that we both learned how to do at Readers Books.
Mhm.
So, just as a brief introduction, my name is Rosie and I work at Readers Books.
Mhm.
And your name is?
I'm Gia. I used to work at Readers Books.
And now she has a doctorate and
Yeah.
obviously is very smart in teaching her students a lot of things.
But now I have to
But
sell books to students, which is
yes,
equally as difficult, I would say.
yes, because I mean they have to read it, but then they have to also respond about it, and
Exactly.
that's a difficult situation. I just
Yeah.
sell people the book, and sometimes I hear back, and some people I don't. But and so Readers Books has been around for 29 years, and given that we're both 31, both of us grew up with Readers Books. Sonoma is a small town. We only had 2 bookstores growing up, and now we only have 1. You can check out Readers Books by going to Sonoma. We're about a block away from the plaza. And we also have a website and Facebook. Our website is readersbooks.com. I don't know how Facebook works, but you can find us there under Readers Books somehow. And if you want to just look at pictures, we have an Instagram, which is Sonoma Readers Books. Obviously, you know that we have a YouTube because we're on the YouTube. there's a lot of backstory here that we're going to deal with later in a different video. But the short version is the reason I have my job is because of Gia. She worked at Reader's Books before me, and she worked there for what, about how many
off and
years?
on for about 4 years.
About 4 years. So 6 years ago, 6 and a bit years ago, I was moving home and I said, I need a job. And Gia said, oh, okay, I'll get you a job at Readers. And I said, you can't just do that. It's Readers Books. It's an institution. They have to hire people differently than that. And it's been 6 years and I have this job.
You are, to this day, the only person who I've actually successfully gotten them a job. So
it was sheer nepotism.
It was a unique case.
Nepotism. No one was related in the whole thing, but it was still nepotism. So about 4 years ago, I took over buying a lot of the children's books from our book buyer at the store. My coworker and mentor, Jude, has done a fantastic job sort of guiding me through how to do that. And recently we were all thinking, let's spruce up the application a bit. And one thing I said was, hey, how about they have to hand sell their favorite book to us? We'll explain what hand selling is and everything, but like, they have to do that. So then I told Gia about it and we went, oh, but there's a really big difference between what my favorite thing to hand sell is and my favorite thing to read is. And that's going to be the topic of this video. What we're going to do is we'll talk about books in pairs. We each have 2 pairs. One book will be the one where it's like, yeah, I can hand sell this and here's how. And then the next book is, I can't. I'm sorry, but this has been really hard. But it's one of my favorite books. And we'll have little questions in between. So you get to start.
Okay. So I'm going to start with a book that I feel like I could sell, and I have sold it to students before. I've taught this book for 2 semesters now. And the book that I have is Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. And the reason why I love this book so much is you don't get a lot of genre fiction that is written by Native Americans or about Native American characters. And so I really love Trail of Lightning because it has some really exceptional world building. It has exceptional characters. And I get to learn a whole bunch of new things about a culture that isn't really in mainstream American culture. And so I really, really appreciate that. And I think from my mind, one of the big selling points is it's a series. I always feel like people are really excited when they can like discover a new author that has a whole bunch of books, right? And so Trail of Lightning is the first book in what is going to be at least a trilogy. And so there's like a certain degree of like, oh, good, I get into this author and I have like a couple of books. I don't have to go find a new author after a few books. And that's always really, really helpful. And I just like it because it's written like a TV show. So it's really, really quick and it's really visual. And I love it. And I try to get everybody to read it no matter where I am. It's a neat party trick.
I don't know if you know this, but I've sold it by going, I have a friend who loves this book and this is what it's about. So you've sold
vicarious success. So then I would pair it with one of a book that's very important to my academic journey, but that I think would be completely unsellable. This is Hope Leslie. This is a very ugly copy. Don't buy this version because you can't. I love Hope Leslie. It was published in the 1820s, so it's a little bit older, which often makes it hard to sell anyway. I like to call it an intersectional Scarlet Letter because it deals with some of the same themes as Scarlet Letter, but actually acknowledges like the Native Americans. But I really love Hope Leslie a lot. It's a very, very it's an onion. There's so many layers to it, and you start digging into it and you find new and exciting things. It's dense, so it's not particularly easy to read, but I enjoy it a lot. It uses a lot of different genre elements. So there's like a huge section that's a letter, which is really fun. There are sections following different characters. There are characters that narrate stories and stuff like that. So it kind of mingles a lot of different literary techniques in a really, really fun way. Ask me questions.
Why is it important to your academic career?
Well, I wrote my dissertation on it, amongst other books. It's very unusual because it's written by a female author, and there weren't a lot of those in early American literature. And so that's part of the reason why I picked it, is I wanted to write about a woman, but also I just think it's a really exceptional book. It was only recovered in the 90s, so it like disappeared for a long time, and it's finally coming back.
So wait, by recovered, it's a pretty
Yeah,
academic term, right? So
I
by
know.
recovered, it means people wanted to care about it again.
Yeah, so it went completely out of print, and academics had to start digging through people's libraries that had been passed down from generation to generation. And they eventually found a copy, and someone made it their job to read it over, put in the endnotes to explain the bizarre things, and publish it again. And I love Hope Leslie. I try to get everybody to read it, and so far, no success.
That's really sad.
I know. I try.
I would read it
Everywhere I
if I
go.
had time.
Yeah, see, that's what everyone says.
Yeah, yeah, but you know I really don't have time, right?
No, I know. I'm just teasing.
Okay, well,
So,
here are mine, my first set, which
please.
are the children's books, because
Good.
that's my job. And
Yes.
the first one, the one that's very easy to sell, is this one, The We Free Men, which is by Terry Pratchett. You can buy the one I have at the store. There's a link below to all of these books, by the way. And it's one of those books that I can appeal to pretty much anybody. I can give it to a kid and tell them about how it's about this great adventure with these tiny little blue men who are rambunctious and get into a lot of trouble. I can sell it to moms of kids by saying it's an adventure by a little girl who has to rescue her baby brother, and she brings along a big iron skillet. And I can sell it to grandmas saying it's a wonderful adventure that every kid will love about rescuing a kid from the Queen of Fairies. And it's just, it suits everybody. It's a funny little book. And also it's a gateway to Terry Pratchett. And really, you can't go wrong with a gateway to Terry Pratchett.
No.
So.
And I have also vicariously sold this book to many of Eric's, or my husband's students. I always recommend it to them and have had good success.
Yeah, because it's a fun little book that everybody loves. It is a series, and like you said about series, it's always nice to go, and if they liked this one, you can do the next one. And then my other one, Journey to the River Sea, you also can't buy this edition because this one I picked up for 50 pence in Scotland somewhere, because I already loved the book, but I had lost my copy. And this one, it's Eva Ibbotson, and she's, as Jude would say, terribly British, but she also has a knack with characters, and you absolutely love the main character Maya as soon as she appears on the page. She's an orphan. She has to go to a family that's distant cousins of hers. They live in Brazil, and she's so excited because it means that she's going to live in this beautiful forest with all of these creatures and animals that she really cares about. Her mom was an opera singer, and there's an opera house in the town there. But these cousins are they're very colonial. They don't like to go outside. The mother of the family likes to spray everything with disinfectant all the time. It's gross and disgusting. And the governess who goes with Maya is trying to help her learn what she can about the area. There's so much there to unpack, and that's only maybe a third of the story, and it's just a hard thing to sell in a couple of sentences. It's one of those books that I keep in because I'm like, oh, but maybe someone will love this because I loved this book. And I get worried about it. I get worried, maybe no one cares about exciting adventures on the Amazon anymore.
I'm very amused that you picked 2 British books and I picked 2 American books. Yeah, I feel like
actually,
it's pretty
yeah,
in character for us.
This is very in character for us.
So I'm going to now pivot into nonfiction because I read a lot of nonfiction for various reasons, obviously. And the sellable nonfiction that I don't actually have a physical copy of because I'm getting a physical copy, which I bought from readers. But it is called Braiding Sweetgrass, and it's by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And This is probably one of the most beautifully written nonfiction books that I have read in recent memory. It's a beautiful nonfiction book that really merges the best of academic writing. And I don't mean like jargon filled or anything like that. I mean just like thinking through really complex ideas in a very kind of easy to understand way with the best of memoir writing. And the way she can talk about her childhood and her kind of motherhood and stuff like that is really, really stupendous. But it's an environmentalism book. So it's all about how do we craft a better future for our children and our children's children, and how do we kind of radically shift Western culture so that we are no longer fighting nature, but we are kind of living alongside of it. And the way that Kimmerer does this is by merging Western science with Native American spirituality, but also just Native American life, the way that a lot of Native American tribes are tied to seasons and tied to specific spots, and they know the ecology so much better than a lot of Western scientists. So it's a beautifully written book, and it's one of the few environmental texts that I've read recently that is hopeful, and that has a whole bunch of really practical ways to rethink your relationship to the natural world, and really has a great deal of hope that that can happen and that change can happen. And it was really life-changing to read it, and it was really, really helpful, because a lot of environmental texts are, we're doomed, and that's the end of the conversation, right? They don't have a whole bunch of, but if we do this, things might change. So I love Braiding Sweetgrass. I can't recommend it enough. I'm already trying to figure out how to assign it to my students, so someday I'll successfully sell it.
You'll slide it
Haven't
in
quite
there.
got there yet.
Braiding Sweetgrass was always a really interesting book for me, because as kind of a baby bookseller, somebody asked me about it, and I had to look it up, and it was this long journey, and I went like, huh, I should really remember this book. I should remember where it is, because this is such a cool looking book. Incidentally, partly because it is a really nice object. It has this great beveled cover and like really smooth pages and a beautiful braided sweetgrass thing on the cover. And now it has an anniversary edition out, so it's even prettier. It's a lot heavier, but it is prettier.
And beautiful and worth every single penny you can throw at it. I mean, this book it's amazing, and everyone should read it.
Better to support this kind of book and get more like it.
Exactly. The unsellable book, again, very, very important to my academic journey. It is Teaching the Trees by Joan Maloof. This book helped me figure out my dissertation project, and really kind of served as a foundation for most of the questions that I explore in my dissertation. So to say that it was incredibly important to me is kind of underselling it. This is probably the most important book that I encountered in my academic career so far. That being said, I have assigned portions of it, and they have not gone over well with my students. I think that's primarily because the writer is still very academic in this book. She was a professor for a long time, and I think that really comes out in her writing. And so for me, who's so used to reading that, it's easy, it's fine, who cares? For other people who are not used to reading that, it's a little dense, and she assumes a lot of her audience, which is, understandable. But I also think she could be a little emotionally manipulative, and she always does it to protect the environment, so I don't necessarily know how to criticize her for it, but
the poor baby birds.
Yeah, she has some questionable environmental kind of provocations in this book. So I think that can make it a very tricky book to read and to talk about. She has some really important points too, but I think her kind of occasional emotional manipulations can make it really hard to be like, yes, I'm on this woman's side. I trust her and believe her and want to continue reading her. Each chapter is really short though, so like if you don't like one, just go to the next one. It's only a couple pages. But this is also a very beautiful book. I mean, we're talking about how beautiful Braiding Sweetgrass is. Each chapter has a picture of a beautiful tree leaf and bugs. And so this is a really beautiful object too. It's also $20 for a book that's like 150 pages long. But it's a very beautiful book. So, I mean, it's worth most of those pennies.
Well, one thing we've talked about a lot with scholarly texts is that it might not be wholly enjoyable to read, but it's wholly enjoyable to talk about it and to think
Yes.
about it. And I
Yes.
think like it's hard to convince someone in a bookstore or a student in some ways, and an undergrad student, like it's not fun to read necessarily. I don't agree with everything and it has a lot of problems, but you had to think about those problems. And that made you a better reader and a better writer and all that.
Yeah.
So, not to say it's not a good book, just not a good handsell.
No, you have to, yeah, I think you're right. You have to think a lot about it. And we aren't always going to buy books to make us think really hard. We're often going to buy books that can comfort us and keep us entertained.
Exactly. And keep us entertained is my very sellable one, which is
Yes.
exciting because it matches my clothes today. It's called Sourdough. And you can't actually buy this edition because it's an advance from 3 years ago, but I do love having it. So this one is such a good book for when people say, I just want something fun. I just want something that I don't have to think about too much and that is just fun and interesting, but not badly written, they say very firmly. None of this trash. And I go, oh, okay, you should try Sourdough. It's about a tech worker who lives a very sort of sterile existence, and most of what is consumed in the cafeteria in her office. It's like disgusting sludge of energy packety things. So she comforts herself by getting takeaway almost every night from a little restaurant that lives near her, and she gets delivery, and every single one has sourdough in it. And one day the delivery driver says, I'm sorry, we have to close up. There's been an immigration issue, but we like you. You're our #1 customer. So take this sourdough. Here's how you take care of it. And you have to play our traditional music to it every day. And it sounds like maybe it's going to turn into a weird rom-com, but instead it turns into a scientific journey through like the depths of farmers market drama. And it's very well done. It's very fun. So anyway, you can get the paperback edition at the store, and it's just a lot of fun.
Does it make you really hungry when you read it though?
The beginning did. The end just made me laugh a lot because I know farmers market people in California in the Bay Area, and it's just like, yeah, that person definitely isn't Alice Waters, I'll tell you that much. Totally not Alice Waters. So not hungry, and honestly not wanting to keep a sourdough starter.
Interesting.
Yeah, because the sourdough starter has some interesting growth issues when it comes to being a culture. It just really really becomes a culture. But I think it serves an important point of making you laugh and think about food, which is nice. So the unsellable one, which is pretty obvious why it's hard to sell, because it is this thick.
Yeah. Looks like something I would read.
Is Little Dorrit.
Yeah, that's something I would read.
I love this particular edition. You can tell I love it a lot. I read it during jury duty. I love Charles Dickens. I really truly do, especially his late, very long novels. But have you ever tried to sell Charles Dickens to anybody? They go, I would like something to read. And you go, Charles Dickens. And they go, no, I don't want to read Dickens. Which is a shame because he's hilarious and because one book will last you forever. Like it's a very long book, but you care about the characters the whole way through. It's basically like reading 3 books in one. It's fun. If you've never read or heard of Little Dorrit, it's about a young woman who is called Little because she is stunted in growth, basically, because she grew up in the Marshalsea prison for debtors in London. Her father is the father of the Marshalsea, the man who's been in longer than anyone else. And it's sort of this tale of devotion to a father, but at the same time, like why that father is not worthy of devotion. There's 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 side plots because it's Dickens, but at the core of it, it's about fathers and daughters and sort of your obligation to your elders versus their obligation to you. So it's a wonderful book. It's just Dickens. So it's very, very long. I do recommend listening to him on audiobook, and we have a Libro.fm affiliate account, so check them out. They're very nice. And that's Dickens.
Dickens is Dickens. Gotta be real. I want to say that once when I was at Readers, someone came in trying to find like some classics to read, and I tried them on Dickens, and they were like,
They're just like, no. And it's so sad because he's such a good storyteller, and he's surprisingly accessible in his stories. And he has these great things about making fun of people. Excellent. I think somewhere
and like his character names are kind of worth the price of entry. I mean, if nothing else, just the kind of bizarre names that he can come up with.
I don't know. I think one thing that I learned from this exercise is, I guess it comes down to like, what would I recommend my friend, and how would I make it make sense to that person to want to read it. But assuming that you're not friends with this person necessarily, and you don't know them very well, and you have to hand them a book and see what they think in under, what do you think, under 20 seconds? Which,
I mean, for in the store for hand selling, you have an incredibly limited, like we each took what, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes to kind of justify our book. You would never get that in person. You would get 20, 30 seconds.
Maybe if someone's really nice and likes you a lot, it's like a minute. But
maybe
it's a really fast pitch, which is why I think you have to go to an independent bookstore, because we read the books, we think about the books, we talk about the books, we call our old friends, and we talk about our books until we can just distill it into 20 seconds of like, hey, I think you'll like this. This is why you should buy it. It's nice the way that people approach books in bookstores. But we didn't come up with an outro.
We definitely did not.
We did not come up with an outro.